On June 25th, 2024, something shifted in Kenya. What started as a protest against the finance bill turned into a watershed moment. Young Kenyans, mostly Gen Z, filled the streets not just with chants and placards, but with courage, rage, and a hunger for justice and reforms. They marched to the Kenyan parliament to make a point that reforms were needed, and voting a representative or a member of parliament means they get to actually represent your views. They marched for more than tax reforms. They marched for dignity, for a country that listens, for accountability, and for a future they could believe in. But in return, some paid with their lives. Since then, being Kenyan has meant living in fear, tension, abductions, and disappearances, um, and inaction from those in power. Tonight, we talk about it, about freedom, about grief, about being Kenyan in a time when speaking up can cost you everything: good governance and the fight against corruption. I'm your host, Helen Kimaru, and I'm joined by the incredible founder and host of Concern Podcast, a podcast that covers trending global issues in politics, economics, innovation, entertainment, and more, while mentoring and providing a platform for young leaders. Emmanuel Taban is the host of this particular podcast. Welcome to the Spark It podcast, Emmanuel. Yet another time. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. I'm feeling okay, and it's good to have you again on your podcast. I'm excited.
Yeah, thank you honestly for making time to come here and talk to us. And as I mentioned, you already have also your personal podcast, and I hope the our listeners and viewers get to actually go and see what you are up to, because I feel like it's a very well informed podcast, and you're doing incredible work out there. Yeah, and particularly today we will be as a political analyst yourself. Today we will be talking about the current issue facing Kenyans. And I would definitely love to hear more from an outside perspective what you think about what has happened since June 25th of 2024 to where we are at as a country, and all the, just have give us what you think, or your sort of your point of view. So it's quite sad that as a country and as a Kenyan, I feel like it's quite a sad episode for me, knowing that since June 25th of the end of 2024, a lot of young Kenyans have sort of lost their lives. Others have been abducted, others have disappeared, and a lot of stuff has been happening, and the accountability has almost been at zero. So before we even get started, what do you remember, for example, vividly about that day and what has followed?
Yeah, I think from last year,
Mm-hmm.
Kenyans have clearly indicated through the protest what they want the government to do, and that was shown through the protest where they marched into parliament and they stormed parliament. Uh, when the parliament was at the session of actually trying to pass in the finance bill that they were totally against. And that clearly shows us that even after knowing that the majority of Kenyans were not willing to embrace the bill, the members of parliament in the National Assembly went ahead and then they passed the bill, which later on was taken to the president for inaction. And that tells us clearly how disconnected the members of parliament are, or the leaders are, from their constituencies. Because in a real sense, before you pass any bill in the parliament, you are supposed to go and make consultation with those people who send you to parliament. You are their representative, but it feels like the people in the parliament, the members of parliament, were completely disconnected from their people. So, and the most interesting and the most part that has actually stuck in my mind during last year protest and the events that unfolded after it was, when the young Kenyans stormed parliament and they marched into the parliament demanding that their voices are heard. And that was very clearly reflected on the time when the president conceded and then he came in and made a press briefing saying that he has heard the cry of the people and therefore he is not going to pass the finance bill, is not going to sign it and then making it law. That was one of the significant moments that actually tells us that the voices of the people or the voice of the people prevailed. And that is one moment where I believe that the majority of the Gen Zs or the young Kenyans were proud of, because they felt for the first time during that moment that their voices were heard. And that was reflected in the president not signing the bill into a law, which was very important.
Mhm. But
Mhm.
I do kind of feel like this would have been avoided. I think I like the fact that you've talked about the gap and the fact that there is like a clear indication of our leaders not really listening to the people they represent. Because if probably they would have actually listened from the word go, we would definitely not even be talking about June 25th. It would have totally been sort of like a totally different story. And where we are at right now, in my own personal view, I feel like despite the fact that that happened and so many young people even lost their lives trying to ask for accountability and sort of reforms and for the leaders to look into these bills and maybe make a change, I kind of feel we are in a loop. It's like as Kenyans, we are stuck in the same loop. Whatever happened last year has continuously happened, maybe not on the same scale, but it definitely feels like there's that gap where are you really listening as a leader, and what are you doing? Are you really representing the people or sort of your personal views? Because there's been abductions, people have been abducted because of airing their views. There's been censorship. I remember we talked when we hosted you the other time, we also talked of censorship in the context of like the play by Butere Girls. Young girls could not be allowed or on a stage. What do you think, for example, since now, like I feel like June 25th sort of set the pace, uh, and it's not like we have experienced so much change. What do you think, in your personal opinion, talks about what do you think that kind of reflects in the context of freedom of expression in Kenya? Are we making any steps forward or we are just stuck?
Yeah, I think I really have a very great admiration for Kenya. And
Mm-hmm.
Kenya holds a very special place in my heart because, one, it is in Kenya that actually gave the start for the birth of my country in 2005. The comprehensive peace agreement that gave
Mm-hmm.
resolutions so that South Sudan would go for independence in 2011 was signed in Naivasha in Kenya, and that therefore
Mm-hmm.
gives me a very good connection with Kenya and how important Kenya is. I have also admired that Kenya is one of the only country in East Africa that for the last 60 years probably had more than four different presidents, and that is a very very good sign. They've had a little bit kind
Mm-hmm.
of different political dispensation coming at very different time compared to most of the East African countries, which is very good. And also, I still hold the view that Kenya is the only country in East Africa that still, even when not in a very good manner, they still allow some little freedom of speech to people. I
Mm-hmm.
watch a lot of news in Kenya. I watch a lot. Like I watch
Mhm,
TV shows, and I would see that I'm seeing like young Kenyans given the platform to go on a national TV and express their views. Though a few of them sometimes would be scared. I mean, like. Threatened and then maybe abducted, but majority of them still have that freedom. They still go on TV station, national TV station, and air out what they don't like, what they feel is not good about the president. A lot of political opponents will still come on national TV and talk against the president, and sometimes nothing happens to them. Whereas that is a very good move. I feel that Kenya is in a state where they shouldn't be actually. I mean, they should be focusing so much on giving the freedom of speech to the people. And I've seen this that the Constitution of Kenya, of course, I've never gone through so much in the Constitution of Kenya, but Kenya has like a very very good constitution, a very progressive constitution that was written in 2010, a very good one. And part of it, one of the articles, I think it's I don't remember, but about Article 33 that gives the freedom of expression to every Kenyan. And when
mhm,
we look at the freedom of expression, um, it actually gives people the right to acquire information, the right to inform, the right to impart your ideas. in any way, if you want to do it in artistic way, in a creative way, through a digital way,
Mhm.
that is the right that you're given. And therefore, a country like Kenya that I have admired for so long, and that I still hold the view that it is one of the countries in East Africa that's still great. I feel like Kenya should be doing better than what it's doing right now. Like,
Mhm.
people should be given the right to express themselves, but also that does not actually take out the point that the constitution also has some limitations, whereas it gives people the right to express themselves, but there is also a limitation where you are restricted. You're restricted from saying something. For instance, when what you are saying, it's going to incite violence, if it is going to create like hate speech, it's going to incite ethnic divisions, that is what you're not supposed to be doing. And
Mhm.
then, but also we do have ways in which people who incite violence should be handled. It's not necessarily through abduction, it's not necessarily through torture. That is not the way. The constitution is, as almost every guideline, it gives you every penalty for people who violates it. And therefore, I feel that whereas Kenya is giving that freedom of speech to some extent, but there's that context where I think a few people, maybe in the government, who perceived to be having all powers, are trying still to drag Kenyans behind by doing unnecessary things like these unnecessary abductions and arrests. And I think they deserve to do better than that.
Mm. I think
Mhm.
what I'm hearing from you is more of, in as much as there's freedom of expression, there's definitely limits, and also there's a context of maybe people abusing it, especially the people in power. How can you hold people in power accountable so that they get to that place where, if there's a constitution and you're supposed to probably go, if it's that Article 33, definitely about freedom of speech, how can you now hold leaders, especially in the context of Kenya right now, how can you hold leaders accountable so that they don't abuse that? Because I realize there's this trend where Kenyans will come online, maybe they'll have that social activism, but when it comes to, and then when we say certain things, leaders are triggered, they call us names and say a lot of other things. But when it is them, they can say wherever they go, whenever they get a mic, whether it's in a church, it's in a social gathering, as if, in my personal opinion, it kind of feels as if they feel like they have more rights to say whatever they want than just any other person out here. How do you
Yeah,
now end up holding those accountable?
I think I've seen that severally. Like, a section of politicians believe that they have more powers than the common people. And then, but in a country where there is rule of law, definitely there is no one who is above the law. Everyone is supposed to be treated equally, whether you are a member of parliament, a senator, you are a presidential personal assistant, or you are a vice president, or even the president himself. You are all supposed to be guided by the constitution of a country. So,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately, I've seen that so many politicians in Kenya, most of them are so much bitter when it comes to speaking in public, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel that even that the anger that is shown by Kenyans, it is the result, it is a reflection of the leaders. So you find
Mm-hmm.
that you go and someone is killed, a protester, someone goes on the street and protest, and this person is shot dead, and then you, as a member of parliament who is supposed to represent the will of the people, you stand in the parliament, and then you say people are killed everywhere in the world. So what we do is just we sympathize and forget about. Just imagine how the common people will
Yeah.
feel about that. You speak about
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
You come on the public. You are a CS or a PS or a member of parliament, and then you come on a public gathering and then you speak. If you dare to go on the street, we will abduct, we will kill you. So what do you think the people would say? Obviously, they will take on that anger as well. And then the same way that you're reacting to them is going to be the same way that they're going to act. But as I said before, that in every country that has a constitution that is progressive as the one of Kenya, no one is above the law. Everyone is supposed to be treated equally, whether you are a member of the political elite or you are just an ordinary citizen. The rule is supposed to be treating you equally. So, and we've just noticed these in the recent event that happened when one of the bloggers was killed, Albert Ojwang, and then there were allegations that the deputy inspector general police was one of the guys who was behind it, Eliud Lagado, who like he was behind, and then people were asking him to step down, and then you see
Mm-hmm.
how things are happening. Like they were hesitant at first; they didn't want even to make him resign, but out of public cry, that is when they had to make him step aside. So I feel that there is that disconnection, that the people in the political elite feel that they hold like more powers than the common people, which is completely wrong. In a country that has a constitution, the law is supposed to treat people equally. So I think that is what, this should start right away from the president. If the president speaks about this, when he says everything about this, that when you commit a crime, it doesn't matter if you're a CS, if you're a head of a police unit or what, you deserve to be treated equally. So when the leader of the country starts speaking in that voice, and then I think it's going to be reflected in the entire country. So everything starts with the leader. So when the leader starts speaking that way, then I believe everyone is going to embrace it.
Mm, nice. And do you think you mentioned what is it called? You mentioned Albert Ojwang, and the way somebody can go into parliament and say, "Oh, people die everywhere." Do you think, from the perspective of our leaders, could it also be sort of intentional for them to trigger public rage? Because what purpose does it serve to say stuff like that when you are living in a very tense sort of political environment, especially for the people? Is that like rage that they're doing it intentionally to trigger people, or what would be the purpose, honestly?
I think, you know, politics is sometimes so tricky. There are people who easily survive in political space through
Mm-hmm.
such utterances. You
Mm,
know, and that is so common. When you are so much aligned to someone, for instance, in the case of Kenya, we have so many political groupings.
yeah.
So you know that for you, in order to survive, in to still
Mm-hmm.
be kept in your political group, so you need to
Mm-hmm.
align into what your people say. So if people are against something, so you should always come out and speak against it. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. If you are a member of maybe the government, you always have to come and speak out what the government likes you to speak. You're not allowed to speak your mind freely. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is
Mm-hmm.
so dangerous. It's so dangerous that people don't really speak what the representative want, what their constituency wants to hear, or what their constituency wants them to go and represent in their parliament. But in most cases, they speak what their bosses would like to hear from them, and that's what I think trigger all these kind of utterances. When you see people in parliament speaking, they're not addressing their constituencies, they're not addressing the parliament, but they are addressing their bosses. They are addressing either one of the biggest guy in the government or in the opposition. So that they just feel they're like they belong to a certain political grouping. So that's how sometimes people survive in a political space. So you will have to be dragged into saying something that is not of your interest, but just because you belong to a certain political group, you have to say it so that you are in alignment with their ideas.
Mm. And I like that you have actually said that, because when I try to sort of analyze what has been happening in Kenya for the last 1 year, it kind of feels like for the longest, as you've said, like these leaders, they are more aligned to maybe their bosses and what their bosses want. And I feel like maybe for the longest period of time, we lived in such a, it was, that's like the bubble we lived in for the longest. And what happened last year was definitely like, it's like it's the way you can run an experiment and then there is that one outlier, like the one thing that becomes different. It was the first time like
Right.
people realized like, oh, by the way, this is not working for us. And who are you representing? So people start asking questions, and they're like, no, when you go to vote for that finance bill, we want you to say no. And then at the end of the day, maybe some of the members of parliament who were told to say no by their constituents, they went and said yes. So it definitely, I think, for the leadership, especially because most of them have probably been in politics for the longest, they were sort of used to just doing what they want and saying they're representing the will of the people, but that's not necessarily what they were doing. And from because we kind of destabilized like something they're used to, like we diverted them from their normal playbook. I feel like to some extent they've not been able to adjust and realize that, oh, by the way, these people can actually hold us accountable, and we would have to do what they want. I guess, which is why sort of there's sort of that conflict between the political elite and just the common mwananchi, honestly, from my personal perspective.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. And I
Right.
think you also mentioned, let's talk about Alberto Juang, honestly. You did mention a little bit about Alberto Juang. For me, the Kenyan police service, their job, they say it's to serve and protect. I think it's actually probably their slogan, it's serve and protect. The fact that this person, let's talk about that and social activism. People have been using social media to speak about injustices or maybe the things they don't like about the current leadership and stuff like that. And Alberto Juang, that's exactly what he was using his platform to do. And he was arrested in Kisumu, and a day later ends up dead in a police cell. For people who are supposed to serve and protect, what do you think? How do you think this looks like, especially for Kenyans? Are we supposed to sort of fear for our lives? Or because I mean, the next time people, because it's kind of triggering, the next person, the next time maybe you see a police officer, even as people plan to go for this mandamano tomorrow, because there's a protest tomorrow which will be June 25th of 2025. How does this sort of collectively reflect on the police service and the fact that they're supposed to serve and protect, and also the in the context of freedom of speech and social activism?
Yeah. The role of police everywhere in the world is to protect the lives of the common people and to keep law and order. So that is entirely the role of police in every country.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of Albert Ojwang, who was abducted simply because he had posted something about some guy in the police. I think that was the deputy inspector general, and then later on, he was abducted from his home county and then brought to Nairobi right away, crossing, I mean, the number of miles before reaching Nairobi. And that tells us, as I said before, that the Kenyan constitution is a very progressive and very good constitution that grants uh, the right to expression. You can do it in any way you want. So I feel that, but also if that police member who felt that Juang was attacking him, if he felt he was falsely accused, then the best thing would have done is to also sue him and maybe ask that he should be like arraigned and then be questioned about his statement. That should have been the best thing that he would have done, not picking him from his family in the middle of his family and then dragging him right away to Nairobi. Yet there are even other police stations, maybe in Kisumu, where he was arrested or along the way, but he was picked straight away from his home county to Nairobi. That tells us a lot about the police service. This means that there are a certain clique of people within the police service who are trying to just like portray a very negative image of the police service. And I think
Mm-hmm.
you may agree with me that I think Kenya has some of the professional. I like the Kenyan army. I like the Kenyan police service. It really has very professional individuals, but there are only a section of people within the police service that might be arrogant and then trying to just portray a negative image of the police. But I think it's important that people will be given their right to
Mm-hmm.
express themselves. It's not good to just stop someone from thinking. when I impart my ideas, whether on social media or write it through an article, publish it on website or where on that, those are my ideas, that is my thinking. So someone shouldn't be penalized for making his ideas, for displaying his thoughts. It's really not good when the police service do that. But I feel also that when this thing happened, just for the police service to keep their name, when such action happen, then people who are suspected to be the ones who carry out these operations should be also brought to book, and they shouldn't be
Mhm.
spared. Like, it doesn't matter what position you hold in the police service. If you're known to be one of the persons who actually carry out this operation, then you should be also brought to book, so that it is good to spare the name of the police service rather than just giving a negative image. So I think that was an unfortunate event that happened. And then I think it's one of the issue that the Kenyan Gen Z are going into this tomorrow's protest with it in mind. The
Mhm.
killing, the
Mhm.
killing of Albert Ojwang. I think it has a little bit raised some kind of anger in the hearts of the young Kenyans. And then among them
Mhm.
also the recent shooting of the hawker in the previous protest,
Mhm.
Boniface Krioki, who was shot. Just his only crime was selling masks on the street, so he could go and maybe provide for his family that he finds hard to get in the because of the current economic situation in the country. So I think that these are some of the issues that really the police should get out and then fix them. But also they should know that people have the right to express themselves. But also, even when you arrest someone, I think there is a specific number of time that this person should be arraigned in the court, and then his arrest should be known, his whereabouts should be known. He should have an access to a legal representation. Like, his family should have known where exactly their son is arrested, where their son is kept.
Mhm.
That should have been done, but it never got done. And as a result, Ojwang got killed, I mean, tortured, and then later on killed, found dead. So I think that was an unfortunate event that happened. And majority of Kenyans are going into tomorrow's protest with that in mind. And that is very unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also to add on to what you're saying, it's kind of sad that also even for Boniface was shot at a protest that was actually, we were protesting against police brutality because of what happened to Juang. So for him to also be
Right.
shot in such a protest, it's actually like, it's irony, honestly. Because
Right.
like,
That's true.
even try to pretend, even if it's for a day, that there is no issues, you don't have issues to with the people, because you are police, we are protesting against you. I feel like the least they could have done is to make sure like the protest would have been, peaceful. Because when people went for the protest, I was actually following the protest, and it was so peaceful until later in the day. And maybe the other thing we need to also talk about is the fact that there was the goons in the protest. People are calling them goonsies. It's so funny, but yeah. So in this particular protest, they ended up being like, I've seen a lot of exposes, honestly, even in the news. They've been talking about the way there's some politicians, some very high in the hierarchy in government, who've been paying other young people, and especially young people from slums, to come and disrupt the protests. I wonder what sort of precedent this sort of sets for the next sort of protest. Because, I mean, like tomorrow, there's been a lot of conversation online. Tomorrow, people want to go for the protest and they want to commemorate like who we term as our heroes, because they lost their lives on June 25 of last year, 25th. But right now, there is also that idea of goons might show up and disrupt what is supposed to be a peaceful protest in such a space where people even feel like they have the power, the money, and they can even offer other young people maybe who are jobless somewhere to do the dirty work for them. How do you end up even having like peaceful protests? How can you safeguard protests, especially peaceful protests, from such kind of, and especially, I guess this kind of goes back to the kind of leadership that we have. How I wonder, just how do we even get to that kind of space?
Yeah, I watched the latest protest, the one that happened
Mm-hmm.
uh, where protesters were marching on the streets calling for justice for the killing of Albert Ojwang. And the most disturbing part about that protest is when I saw um, the police trying to disperse the protesters. And then also I saw a number of hired goons. They said hired goons, uh,
Mm-hmm.
like just walking on the street alongside the police, and the police were just like just watching them do their jobs, and there was not reaction. And that clearly tells
Mm-hmm.
us that the police knows exactly where those people were coming from, because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't even touch them. They were walking on the street alongside them, dispersing the protest. And there was this popular assumption that most of these goons were hired by the governor of Nairobi, Sakaja Johnson. And I've seen that you saw Babu Owino, the I think the member of parliament for Embakasi East, came out and then he openly called it that it was hired by Sakaja, and majority of people have that perception. But I think that is a very very bad image, because one, I think Kenya is viewed internationally as a country that has some kind of space for freedom of expression. So I think
Mm-hmm.
hiring goons, hiring people just to come and disrupt what would have been a peaceful protest, I think that really gives a very bad image to the country.
Mm-hmm.
And the president shouldn't really allow that to happen. If it is done by one of his closest people, one of his closest persons, I think he should call out against that, because at the end of the day, it is not going to be the image of that the member of parliament who is hiring the goons or the governor, but it is going to spoil the image of the president. I think
Mm-hmm.
the Kenya has enough police police personalities who can really contain a protest. They have that. There's no need to hire goons. They have enough material, I think. But even one of the things is that as long as the police are able to just protect the people, the protesters, I don't feel these protesters are ready even to make destruction. They are not ready. All
Mm-hmm.
they need is just to be availed with that opportunity to have their issues presented and the reason why they're protesting. That's all. So hiring goons to come and distract a peaceful protest, I think it's really uncalled for. It's not a good. It doesn't really pose a very good picture to the government of Kenya, and specifically to President Ruto. So
Mm-hmm.
and if at all there are any plans that are ahead for tomorrow, the same to bring on goons, maybe to make this. I think that should really be called off, because it's gonna set like a very bad image to the country. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I was
Mm.
also watching news, I think yesterday. I saw like different TV stations. They had highlighted those stories of goons and stuff like that. And some of them had even gone down there to the slums to actually find out, to investigate who are these goons. And some of them came on TV. Of course, most of them we were not shown their faces, but most of them ended up being hurt. Some would even say they were not paid, like they were expecting pay, which is very little money, and they ended
Right.
up not being paid. For me, even as we have this discussion today, or we talk about this particular issue, as a Kenyan, honestly, I would appeal to every person out here. I would say, um 500 Kenya shillings might look like a lot of money at that moment, or even 1,000 shillings, but 1,000 shillings cannot buy you your freedom forever. The issues that people are protesting against right now, they'll affect you. They'll affect your mother, your father, your village, your children. They'll affect you, and they'll continue affecting you on a daily basis. So if we cannot join hands today and speak up, those issues are not, they're not just personal issues, they are a national issue. So if you are hired today to disrupt a very peaceful protest that is asking for reforms, or people are protesting against something very very particular that affects everyone else, it might look like something interesting at that particular moment, but you'll be paid 500 that might only last you for a few hours or a day. And then after that, we go back to the same exact issues. We will go to the same problems, and that doesn't even get us anywhere. So my appeal to young people, don't be blinded by money that cannot make any difference in your life. That said, my
Right.
other whatever I would have loved for us to talk about is the gap between. I feel like, as I think you had mentioned it, that there's sort of like a very big disconnect between the political class and the citizens. I don't know even how we actually got here, but it's like over the years, it's kind of become wider. Do you think this gap can be bridged, and or we are heading to sort of, bad waters, like, do you think things will get better for Kenyans?
I think so. I absolutely things will get better because when we look at the majority of Kenyans, these are people who wants change, and obviously, when the majority of the people in the country what are the ones that are in need of change, then obviously change is going to come. And I think
Mhm,
one of the reasons where there is a very big disconnect between the political elites and then the ordinary people is that, when we look at the members of the political elites in Kenya right now, these are people who are in their senior ages, their senior stages. Look at the
mhm,
political class. These are people who have been in politics for the last, if not 30, 20 years. These are probably very old men who were there. They served almost in all the previous administrations. Most of
mhm,
them serve uh, under Moi, some of them serve under Mwai Kibaki, others serve under Uhuru Kenyatta, and others are serving under Ruto. They all serve under these different. So they hold a very conservative view of how things should be done. They probably hold the old way of wanting things to get done in a
mhm,
very disappointing way, in a way where they want to impose their ideas on the people, in a way that they want to stop people from bringing alternative ideas. And then the majority of Kenyans, these are very young people. The majority of Kenyan population, of course, these are very young people who in their young ages, and therefore they are the ones that demand the change. They
mhm,
badly need the change. And I think that's where the difference comes from. We have a section of Kenyans who are very old, have been there in politics for a very long time, and are very used to the old way of doing things. And then we have a new
mhm,
section of Kenyans who have fresh ideas, who have like a new view of how things should be done in the 21st century, who have seen how things have been done in the outside world, and who also want things to be done in their country. But then this is the point where I think it's bringing on that difference. Another group of people wanting things done, like just the two different group of people want things to be done differently. And I think that
mhm,
is the difference. But I feel that to close this widening gap, what the government needs to do is that the young people are all obviously going to be the custodians of the future of the country, and the time is now that they get involved in every decision that is going to shape the future of country. It is not tomorrow, it is not next year in the next elections or in 2027 or whatsoever. It is now that these young people should be brought into the same line, and then their ideas are heard, are actually implemented, so that what they want to be done is actually done right now. And I think when the government does this, when they bring in the ideas from these young people, when they engage these young people, when they listen to them, and I think that is the only way where that gap can be closed. But otherwise, if they continue in the way they are doing right now, where they feel they are always right, and then the young people
mhm.
are wrong, I think that gap is not going to really get closed. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
I was listening to some live today on TikTok. They were talking about a revolution. They say, like, for a revolution to happen, there has to be sort of that consistent showing up for the cause, like what you believe in and stuff like that. And I believe from what you're saying, a lot of young Kenyans, that's why they're persistent. They're like, we won't stop until we see the change. And as you said, for that gap to sort of, become either smaller or maybe even just end, there would be need for people need to be on the same table and talk about these issues, whether it's the old, the young. There needs to be sort of a consensus at some point, because I feel like, the more they don't want to listen, the more it kind of fuels us as young people. We are like, even as we want to be heard, we think things should be done this way. So at some point, it's like them it's almost similar to, maybe not the same exactly, but even in 2007, 2008, when there was post-election violence in Kenya, um, Kofi Annan was deployed here to come and sort of become, what do you call them? He was supposed to bring the two parties together, the two parties that had issues.
Yeah,
So yeah,
like
and
a
at the end of
mediator.
the day, yeah, a mediator, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, so I kind of feel like even at this point in time, we need to find a way to, as you've said, to sit on the same table and see each other's point of view and maybe even come to a compromise. Because if, especially, I would say, for a lot of young Kenyans, people are jobless. Like as you had mentioned earlier on before we started the podcast, of that girl on TikTok who was talking about the fact that she's gone to school, she doesn't have a job, and then she, I think you said they're ready to die. They don't
Yeah,
mind.
that's what
Yeah,
she said.
yeah, they don't mind dying for this cause, this particular cause, because they feel like they don't have anything to live for. So that means, with this kind of, if this is how people are feeling on the ground, and especially young people, it means, and if they're not busy, again, every time somebody posts, we are going to meet next week because there's going to be a protest in the city, people will keep showing up because they're not busy. They're demanding for change. They want to become busy. They want you to create jobs for them. So it will, I feel like it will just keep us in a loop. It's just the same thing happening over and over again. You decide you don't want to listen to me, and then I will also decide I'll show up almost every day, or as many times as I can on the streets. And I feel like with that, it doesn't get us anywhere. We will just be caught up in a loop. People will continue losing their lives for nothing, and it's just a roller coaster over and over and over and over again. um
Right.
you talked about the leadership, and of course maybe we might need to talk about these issues from the concept of the old people, young people coming together and doing these things. But do you think, now that Kenyans will be having elections in 2027, do you think that maybe a regime change, like totally overhauling the whole government through sort of like elections, do you think that that would make a difference for Kenyans?
Um, I I I I think when we look at some section of Kenyans who wants to go on the street tomorrow, they are
Mm-hmm.
saying by tomorrow they want to see like a new transitional government in place, which I believe it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that like the constitution probably gives Kenya like better ways on how leaders are elected, whereas it
Yeah.
says that all powers belong to people, and then they have a right either to exercise it directly or through the elected representatives. So I think the best way that they would do is just to give Ruto his time until 2027. If they feel they're dissatisfied with his service, then they can vote him out. They can vote him out and then bring in a new person that they feel can actually do what they want. But
Mm-hmm.
I think having a new uh, a president maybe in 2027 might not still even change things when we are going to have in Kenya the same president who has been in the past political dispensation, who has probably the same way of thinking. So it is totally up to Kenyans. I am not a Kenyan, so it's totally up to them to decide who they want to be their president. So a person that they feel
Mm-hmm.
represent their views better. But according to me, like calling for a total change of government through a protest demonstration before 2027, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's going to set the country into a leadership crisis. And I really think it's not the best way. The best way they can do is to, yes, go on the street, present their dissatisfaction and do their protest, present their issues, but they can still tell the president that, you know what, you are not doing what we want, we are going to vote you out in 2027, if that's what they feel it's the right thing for them. So
Mm-hmm.
and changing or having a new president in 2027 does not necessarily mean bringing someone who is going to listen to their views and work with their demands, but they really have to be very critical and look at the person who they want to be their president in the next elections. So that is a very important, and I think they have really a good amount of time to assess who can be their best president, who can serve their interests as Kenyans, but also as young people. Kenya has so many alternatives. They don't run sort of leaders. They are very capable leaders. Many of them who can run Kenya better than uh, maybe the current administration. So it's totally up to them to decide who they want to be on the ballot and elected as their next president. Uh,
Wow. Yeah, I think I actually do agree with you with what you're saying. A total regime change at this particular moment using a protest might not sort of probably really help us, because I have seen a lot of other countries, even like Sudan, what they have gone through in the
right.
last couple of years and how that has looked like for them. In as much as just adding to what you're saying, in as much as I think we want change, I feel like also sometimes change might take a little bit of time. And also, having a new president, for me, according to me, I feel like it is important, but it might not be in the next election, it might not be as important as having a new member of parliament, and especially looking for one that sort of speaks or maybe represents your views as a citizen. So even during the next election, for me, I would tell, like, us as young people, as Kenyans, we probably need to do better. Even as we think about who we are voting, we need to look at all the way from the grassroots level. Who is your MCA? Who is your women representative? Who is your member of parliament? I feel like if we think critically and do the changes from even the lowest of levels as we go up to maybe the presidential candidate, that will probably bring us more meaningful change than just changing just one person. Because these laws that are made in parliament, they're not made by the president. Maybe he'll just assent the laws, but it is your local member of parliament who is probably saying yes or no to something that either favors you or doesn't favor you. So I think as Kenyans, we definitely need to do better, because I feel like also the leadership that is currently in power right now, it's also a true reflection of our choices as the people, you know. So in as much as we also want to hold them accountable, we also need to be accountable to ourselves and do better. But that said, also I kind of feel like, you've really talked or mentioned the constitution. I feel like Kenya, yes, has like a really good constitution, but I feel like what is sort of lacking is the accountability process. Like, it's like we are stuck
Right.
in the accountability part of it. How best can we hold these people accountable, even as we wait, even if we were to say we are going to wait for the next election to have these changes? How best can we hold these people accountable? Do they want us to show up in every mandamano, or should we take them to court? Or, yeah, I think that's where we are stuck.
Right.
Accountability.
You're totally right.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, I feel like I think we have sort of cut across some of the things that I really wanted us to talk about in this conversation. And I'm sort of saddened by the fact that a lot of young people died. Approximately, the- I've read so many sources. They keep saying it's 61 people who died on June 25th of 2024, but it kind of feels like it was more people that died on that particular day. And to this date, they've never gotten any justice. The government has not held anyone accountable. There is, apart from, say, for example, Ojuang, who died recently, and there was all these idea of trying to bring everybody who was caught up in the mess to account. But for people who lost their lives last year up to this particular moment, nothing has ever been done for those families, and the fact that they lost their loved ones. What would you say about that in the context of the government trying to remain accountable to the people?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you when you say Kenya has a very good constitution, but the only part that is lacking right now is the accountability part. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, you did mention that. Um, Last year, when the young Kenyans, when they stormed parliament, and then some of them were killed. By that time we had Kithure Kindiki, who was then the CS for Interior, and then he I think he gave a statement saying that they were carrying some investigation to know if at all the members of the Kenyan Defense Force were directly involved in killing some of these protesters. But then some months later, like when the BBC African Eye came up with the documentary, The Blood Parliament, that actually gave a very clear picture of who was involved in killing some of these protesters. Up to now,
Mm-hmm.
we haven't had any accountability from the government, even after uh, clear pictures were shown that these were the specific people who killed some of the protesters, like likes of the David Chege, who was killed on on the protest ground. There was no accountability for that up to now, and I feel there's no one no member of the Kenyan Defense Force who was held
Mm-hmm.
accountable for that action. And I feel the best thing that the government should have done, or the president should have done, on the if day of the commemoration of the protest tomorrow, is to just make like some kind of address in regards
Mm.
to the lives of those who were lost. Carry out some, I mean, like have some press conference or an address uh, coming out and telling Kenya exactly what, as a government, they have done in regards to those people who were killed last year, and what are they going to do to their families, and what they're expecting, how, what are the reforms, what policies are they going to bring, maybe in the police unit or in the army, so that such incidents don't happen again in the country. Just a kind of inciting hope in Kenya, so that even those who are planning to go on protest tomorrow will have some kind of their anger reduced. I expected that to be done like today, maybe by the president, but I think it's not done. We just had some random communications from politicians on gatherings, giving in state threats and what, and I feel that's not the best way that they would actually solve this issue. The president should have come out and then give an address on just trying to like appeal to Kenyans to be peaceful in tomorrow's protest, allowing them to go on the street, but asking them, requesting them to be peaceful, and also telling Kenyans about what steps they have taken in regards to those who were killed in last year protest. I think that would have been the best thing. That would really have been the best
Mm.
thing that they have done. The lives that were lost were very unfortunate, and I think um, that shouldn't have happened to any Kenyan who were just exercising their constitutional right. So it's unfortunate that some of them lost their lives. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying also shows the disconnect, adds to the disconnect that is there between the political class
Right.
and the ordinary citizen, and also to some extent, or to a larger extent, the lack of empathy, because some of
Right.
you could literally neutralize some of these things by being empathetic towards the people, and as you said,
That's true.
even coming up
Exactly.
with a statement to show that you actually care, you are even looking into these things. Maybe you have not necessarily gotten to the conclusion of the matter, but at least you're doing something about it. So yeah,
Right.
I guess the disconnect keeps becoming, bigger, and at this point it's like, I don't think they really care that much, which is very triggering. And that's why I feel like Kenyans will keep showing up for those protests at the end of the day. Yeah, anyway. Have you been on TikTok lately?
Yeah. I'm
Did
always
you
on TikTok at my free time.
Did you see the trend of people lately in the last, like, I think 2 days? People have been taking pictures. They are preparing to go for the protest tomorrow, and they have been taking pictures. Some of them, they're saying they're preparing an eulogy, that this is how I want to look like. Do you think that is that like dark humor, or maybe people are trying to find ways to cope with the, maybe because people have gone through so much grief during this whole period of
Right.
time? Do you think it is dark humor, or maybe people are just finding ways to cope with the loss and all the shenanigans happening?
I think Kenyans. I think I've come to a realization that Kenyans are some of the few people in Africa that are very unpredictable, and they are. I think at some point they have like a very high level of humor that they possess, especially how they respond to some issues. Like they do it in a very very interesting way. I've also seen a picture of, some guy posting about the schedule for tomorrow's protest, and then listing the timing. They will start with prayers and speeches from members of their families of those who were lost. Then they will head to State House, and then they will go and storm State House, and then declare a new administration, and which will end into uh, like a new political dispensation. Which I believe, Kenyans really are very they present their issues in a way that is very interesting. But regarding those ones posting their pictures, I think they are really very disturbing, because when someone comes out to an extent where they are posting about expecting themselves to die tomorrow, and then want
Mm.
things to be done the way they want in case they die, I think that is so disturbing. And one video that I came across was of a lady who was posting about her her problems, challenges that she has been facing since she graduated from the university, and she's posting that, saying her last word in case she will die tomorrow. I think that is so bad. Really, it tells us how determined these young people are to go to the streets tomorrow. When someone is determined to the point of death, then you know that they are very serious about something. You will know that something is not a joke. You know that the issues that they are going through are really very, very serious, and they have really impacted them so badly. And I think this is where the
Mhm.
government needs to come out and really see that this is not a joke. In my where I come from, it is not allowed for you to be talking about your death when you're still alive.
Mm.
It's not culturally acceptable. So when someone start talking like that, just know that they are overwhelmed by some big problems that they are going through. I saw one guy posting that uh, they are going to the street tomorrow, and in case he dies, he should be buried with the Kenyan flag, and those who will come after him should be informed that he was trying to fix his country. These are really very, 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 very strong words that can really engineer some determination to go on the street. And I feel really Kenyans are determined to go on the street, and what the police need to do is tomorrow just ensure that they are protected, they are not tortured and manhandled like how it used to, like what it happened last year. So yeah, it's interesting that they are presenting their things in a very weird way, but also it's disturbing that these are not things that should just be spoken easily. The things to do with that, these are very serious issues. And when someone reach that extent of speaking in that way, just know that things are not really right for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Death is it's sort of like a taboo topic. It's not something that you can boldly talk about it when you're still alive. Yeah, so I definitely agree with your point. And maybe it's time the government started reconsidering sort of their perspective, where they are at, and what needs to be done to probably contain the situation. There's no need, I feel like there's no need of more bloodshed. We all need to be accountable in our own ways. They need to be accountable on their part as the leaders of this nation. Yeah, and to also add to what you're saying, I saw Amnesty International. They posted on TikTok. Literally, they posted a video about a protest starter pack. I even wrote it down. They're like, one of the things you need to do is to tell someone where you are if you're going for the protest. You need to have a bag, and in your bag you should have like a national ID, airtime and data. You need to have emergency contacts. You need to charge your phone and have a power bank. You need to dress appropriately so that if you need to run, maybe you need to have good running shoes. You need to move in groups. They also said you should not provoke the police. And if arrested, you should tell somebody and just maintain your cool. They said you can also have snacks, have wet wipes and tissue if you're showing up for the protest. You should have like two water bottles. And then they also said you should have like a vinegar soaked bandana to also help with the tear gas. Yeah.
In
So
case of tear gas.
literally, yeah, I know that will definitely go down. Yeah, so the fact that we have gotten to a place where even a very big international non-governmental organization is posting like a starter pack for a protest, it kind of shows you just the way you've talked about the fact that the protest keeps going on and people are so determined they don't even mind losing their lives. It should, I feel like that should probably spark an interest in the people in government to probably lower their egos and come down to the level of the people and listen to them and hear them out. Not just listen, literally hear and implement some of these changes gradually so that we can get to a better space. I don't think we need to lose any more lives, you know. Yeah. So, do you have
Right.
any other words even as we wind up this episode?
Oh, I think tomorrow's protest is obviously it's going to be it's the major event that uh, the whole country is expecting to see what is going to unveil there in the morning starting tomorrow. And I feel there are people even who are not sleeping right now. They now have that anxiety, just waiting when tomorrow will come so they can see what is going to happen. But yeah, as I said before, the your constitution actually provides you the right to go and protest on the street. But as a law abiding citizen as well, when you're given the right to protest, you should also know that you have to do some limits. There are some things that you're prohibited from doing, just like what Amnesty has said, that uh,
Mm-hmm.
the protesters should not actually get into an extent of provoking the police. It's these are people, there are really some good policemen. They are really very good policemen. I've watched some few clips on TikTok of some
Mm-hmm.
policemen who really have the people at heart. They really want to protect their lives. So just a few section of them are very arrogant. So I think the protesters, in case they go on the street, they shouldn't really provoke these men. These are same men just like you. The only difference is that they are putting on a uniform, but they live the same life. Probably they go under the same conditions as you. The only thing is that
Mm-hmm.
they are doing that because maybe they want to protect you. They have some powers from above. But there is no any difference between you, the common people, and these policemen. Some of them even live under terrible conditions compared to you. They go
Mm-hmm.
under mega pay. Their kids might not have that access to go to school. They have no enough money to provide for their home. So whereas you people should, like, have the right to go and present your dissatisfaction, you should also respect these men in uniform. These are people who and are having the responsibility of protecting your lives. So yeah, that's a good that's about what I would tell those protesters. But also as police, I think they should know that they have a responsibility, and their
Mm-hmm.
responsibility is mainly enshrined in all their constitution, and then the acts. Probably I know there are so many acts in the Kenyan in Kenya that actually gives the police that right to do that. But as a policeman, you shouldn't be like, just we have learned a lot. They should learn a lot from what happened to Albert Ojwang. That after being instructed to go and do something, at the end of the day, when you don't have that power, at the end of the day, you are going to be the one that is going to be fried, and that person who is a bigger one, they're going to be freed. Just we have seen so much of what have happened. People who probably have no hand in the killing of Albert Ojwang are the one now being arraigned in the courts, just being accused of that. So you should also be very cautious as a policeman of uh, what instruction you're being given by those above you. What are you going to do? Because at the end of the day, it is going to be on you. They are not going to say who is that maybe OC who gave that orders to shoot that protester. But what they will be interested in, the Kenyans who will have their phones during the protest going to capture that moments of you shooting on that protester, not the OC giving, I mean, not that police above you giving the orders. So at the end of the day, it is going to zero down to the policemen who are going to be active on the ground. So I think they should be very cautious about their actions while uh, on the protest. They shouldn't make lives lost, but rather give a platform, give a very strict path where the protesters should what they should do and where they should do their protest. I think that's the best thing that they should do. Yeah.
Wow. Honestly, I don't even have anything else to add. You've sort of ended it on a very high note, especially on that issue to do with the police. Yeah, anyway, I wanted us to sort of observe a moment of silence for the people who have lost their lives since June 25th of 2024 up to now, and maybe mention like a few names. There was Rex Masai, there was Evans Kiratu, there was Eric Shieni, there was David Shege, there was Bisley Kamau, there has been Albert Ojwang. So we're just gonna observe a moment of silence for them, even as we wind up the podcast. Thank you for listening to the Spark It podcast. I have been your host, Helen Kimaru, joined by the incredible Emmanuel Taban. We were highlighting, the issue of Kenyan protests and what has transpired since June 25th of 2024 up to now. You've been incredible listeners and viewers of this channel, and we appreciate your support. If this episode has sparked an interest in you to probably even start more conversations about what is affecting you wherever you are, whether it's at home, at school, or even in your own home country, wherever you are, please learn to speak up, because sometimes the issues we go through, they just cut across. And thank you for all the support. Until the next episode, it's been the Spark It podcast. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Cool.